What if Naruto had encountered Hinata, and instead of the initial shyness, there was a connection? As they become friends, certain events would lead to unfortunate circumstances, which would then eventually lead them into another situation where they would switch sides. This is what if Naruto and Hinata not only got together early, but became evil. This idea was suggested to me by the one, the only, your boy Oni, or Oni X. His card is right up here. And yeah, this is actually a series that directly parallels my What If Naruto and Hinata Got Together series. So if you want to see a similar baseline story where they are in fact good and a lot of things are completely different, click here. Also, apart from that, I would like to give a quick shout out to the channel members who are all listed here. And without further ado, I've wasted your time long enough. Roll that intro. As Naruto revels in his newfound power, he is suddenly hit in the side of the head, accompanied by a loud "Hooray!" as his opponent, Killer B, mutters out a last few words before the combat intensifies. "Don't let down your guard, fool, you fool!" As he is basically flung across the room, basically creating a giant crater in one of the walls. As this battle continues, B goes from the 6 tail, which he was currently in, all the way up to fully transformed into the 8 tails. Naruto, on the other hand, until the very end of the match, didn't need to summon no-tailed beast, until he wanted to show off a bit. At this point, the mountain and waterfall they had been in was completely destroyed, as Naruto would throw attack after attack, and after B would throw Biju Bomb after Biju Bomb. It would finally come down to Naruto wanting to take him out in one swift move, without killing him, of course. He turns into Kurama, or somewhat, as he summons a KCM version of Kurama around him. They form a giant Biju Bomb above their head. But next it shrinks down, as he grabs it with his hand, punching the 8 tails, as the Biju Bomb inside blows up. As this happens, it creates enough conductive force to be able to knock out the 8 tails, which is something that's only happened once before against the 3rd Raikage, where it technically knocked itself out. But, as we see, B lays now unconscious, the 8 tails nearly destroyed, keeping him alive, as Naruto just dusts off some dust from his jacket, or his cloak in this case, picking B up and heading back to headquarters. Obviously, you would think that B would be absorbed now, right? No, not even close. As the 10 members of the Akatsuki, Naruto included, stands at the ghetto statue at where B would have been absorbed. Pain says the following: "My brethren in the Akatsuki, today we accomplished our goal. We have gathered all 9 tailed beasts. Obviously, our brother in Naruto would have to sacrifice his life here. But no, he will not, as Tobi, or member Madara Uchiha, would be frozen in place. Something wrapped around him. It's paper. He can't move. As Pain would say, I've been manipulated long enough, Tobi, or should I say, Madara Uchiha," as he lets off a Shinra Tensei in his direction. The other members had already dodged, but Konan's paper held Tobi in place. But the Shinra Tensei didn't do much, as Obito was able to swirl to his dimension and back. He said, "What do you think you're doing, Nagato?" As a quick conversation between Pain and basically Obito would go like, "I know what you're doing." And when Obito wants to know how, the light of the room flickers on, basically showing both white and black Zetsu chained to a wall with ash bones pushed through them, or some of you might know these as truth seeker rods, as he is impaled against the wall. He then only screams, "I'm sorry, Master Obito. I don't know how, but Pain was able to get the information from me." Basically creating a war between Obito, the Akatsuki, and the four remaining great nations. So, what will happen from here on going forward? Well, first comes an initial bout between the Akatsuki and Obito. This is obviously inevitable, but Obito doesn't win, nor does the Akatsuki. Both sides would be in pretty bad condition, with Naruto even dropping a few Biju bombs on Obito. Him barely dodging each time would substantially gain more and more damage, and after a while, he decides to retreat into his dimension. So for a while, we don't hear from him. The Akatsuki had taken a great blow, and the nations had actually taken note of the explosions happening in the Land of Rain, and after some time, they're able to piece together that this is the home of the Akatsuki. Obito, on the other hand, would not return to the Leaf like some of you are thinking, but would actually meet an untimely ally, who would actually heal him. This being a snake man. No, not Orochimaru. Kabuto. Obviously now they do not have access to as many Zetsu, but there are still a few at his disposal. So, Kabuto would either ask Obito if they should kidnap residents of villages to be able to reanimate an army, but Obito says that will not be needed. He gives a list of a few select individuals, one being the actual Madara. Obviously, Kabuto already knew this, so he was able to relay this information, and others like the previous Kage, as he could have them fight on the front of the villages, while him and Madara take out not only the Akatsuki, but the remaining tailed beast. And for the most part, that's what would happen. Madara would come back, and so would some other Kage. But the Akatsuki are currently being surrounded by the villages, slowly but surely. Eventually, when Rain Village scouts figure that the 5 great nations are surrounding them, it'll be too late. Pain would have already been on the move, blasting army after army with Shinra Tenseis, and even once dropped a meteor on them. On the other hand, or on the other side I should say, of the battlefield, Naruto is blasting Biju bomb after Biju bomb. The rest of the Akatsuki is spread out, taking out select individuals. This war is going a lot smoother since there's no reanimations. At least, that's what they thought. This is only a small portion of the 4 great nations' armies, or what remains of the 5 great nations' armies. So, when it comes down to it, when they're eventually faced with the reanimated squadron, as I shall call them, it gets a bit hectic. B, who was actually not dead, is eventually retrieved by Obito, and so is Zetsu. But there's obviously the problem, which is Madara Uchiha, Obito Uchiha, versus Nagato Uzumaki and Naruto Uzumaki. The Uchiha versus the Uzumaki. Never thought I'd say that, but here we go. As the fight continues, Nagato would actually be put off against Obito, with getting a few jabs from Madara, not in the physical sense, but in the verbal sense. He's always mentioning on how Nagato's entire power comes from his eyes, and Nagato would be holding pretty well against Obito, at least for a solid while. Turns out, this Nagato had never gotten sick like the previous one. He had actually stayed pretty healthy and consistent with Naruto and Hinata being there, especially with early setup of the Akatsuki. You would think that Kisame had taken, obviously, Tobi's side, and he actually did. But Kisame had actually initially died when he had invaded the Waterfall of Truth to find B. B would have dispatched him before being dispatched by Naruto, and currently, B is being absorbed by the Geto Maza, which Madara somehow could still summon, even though he didn't have his Rinnegan. Obviously, this is once again a problem, and I know I've said obviously like 3,000 times, and why I script like this, I do not know. But we continue. We find out that the initial battle between Obito and Nagato had lasted almost an entire day at this point, while Madara was warming up against the Nine-Tailed Jinchuriki. Obviously, Naruto is no match, but this is also no wood-release Madara. This is a prime Madara restored without his Rinnegan. But, as we go forth to see, we see that Naruto had been keeping up pretty well, until inevitably he would be defeated. On the battlefield would arrive some select individuals, one being Minato Namikaze, who had actually been there to disperse whatever remained of the reanimation squadron, which was a squadron of Kage who had actually been spread across battlefields around the Naruto world, fighting off the 4 remaining nations, and also smaller villages. On the other hand, we see the one we were all waiting for, Sasuke, appear on the main battlefield, where he sees Madara and Naruto brawling. Obviously, he's no match for either of these individuals, but he can stall with abilities like the Tsukuyomi and obviously the Eternal Flames. So, as we continue, we see a few snipes from Sasuke and even eventually a near perfect Susanoo reveal, as Madara and Sasuke would clash for only a few moments. After maybe what we could say is half the time that Obito and Pain had been fighting, we see both Naruto and Sasuke perish by the hands of Madara. Now the only person that is left is Madara. He actually finds out that his longtime rival Hashirama had been survived, and before he goes to help Obito, he wants to fight him. Just one more time. When he arrives on the battlefield, he sees Hashirama already pre-prepared. This time there wasn't as large of a problem with the 10 tails being released yet, and also not a problem at all on the behalf of, everything else. Reanimation soldiers, like enemy Akatsuki members, but just the few that were threatening lives. So Madara and Hashirama would have an initial all-out battle. And as that continues, Madara would eventually prove superior and take this dub, since he was not a normal reanimation like Hashirama. He actually had a lot larger of a percentage of his power from his initial life restored, while Hashirama only had around a 20 to 40%. So when it came down to it, Madara and Hashirama had their final battle, once and for all. On the other hand, what's happening to a dead Naruto and Sasuke? They were actually pulled into some sort of extraterrestrial plane, not together but separately, as an old man with gray-clad skin, a weird swirl on his head, and a Rinnegan in each eye. He would explain he is the Sage of Six Paths, and they are the reincarnation of his children. And, as he could see, both of them are very lost. Sasuke, in this case, related more to Ashura, as he wanted to protect his friends. People like Lee, Kiba, and even other people within his year. He wished to actually not rely on them, but protect them. On the other hand, Naruto had seeked to conquer the world and have to rule over it. Not in the sense of an iron fist or forcing people to do his bidding, but he knew there would never be any peace if there's a reason to fight. That reason, power. So, what's the solution? Remove the power. So, that's what Naruto seeked to do, and the Sage of Six Paths agreed. He should have never spread chakra throughout the land. That is the downfall of humanity. But, if he didn't, the chance of them surviving if his mother had ever come back were minuscule, if none. So he had to do it. Naruto would offer some sort of, an exchange. He would take all the burdens of the world as long as our boy Hagoromo gave him the ability to remove chakra from others. This would obviously just be people that chakra stems from Hagoromo's originally, so it won't work on other Otsutsuki. But to any human, it should work. And Sasuke, on the other hand, wanted the ability to protect all those he cared about and bring down the foe that stands before him. He had received an impenetrable shield and an all-piercing sword. He even got a bow. At least, he already had one. Now it's just better. So, with their newfound gifts from the Sage of Six Paths, and this time the full Nine Tails returned to Naruto, he would meet his father, if even only for a minute. Turns out, at this point, the Ten Tails had been unleashed. After Naruto died, the Gedomaza had started feeding on his chakra. So, as we see, Madara is now the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. This happened initially after the fight with Hashirama. So Naruto and Sasuke had both been dead for a while. Karin actually keeping both of them alive. Why she kept both of them alive? Well, that's called plot, my boy. So, as we see, eventually Naruto would be accompanied by Hinata, who had actually been fighting on another behalf, taking care of the war. When she sees Naruto completely different from how his KCM had once been, she questions it. But he says, don't worry, she won't have to ever fight again, nor will anyone else, after this war is over. As he launches off, and him and Sasuke partake in another battle with Madara. They would only look at each other and nod, knowing that they have something in common. They want to get rid of Madara and any other threat to this world. Naruto to get rid of power, and Sasuke to protect those close to him. So when it comes down to it, we see them overcome Madara, like they weren't able to earlier. Sasuke, a Rinnegan flaring in one of his eyes, and Naruto, a brand new KCM. Naruto would think the war is over, as he would make it back to his friend, or friends. He would see that Pain had eventually been able to overcome Obito by the help of some other Akatsuki members. One being Konan, who had caught him in an unsuspecting trap, basically slowly swirling away with each Kamui some of her paper bombs. And when he went through with the right timing, she blew it up, forcing him to come back to the real world, where Pain's onslaught would take care of him. So now we stand here, Obito and Madara both dead, Hinata in Naruto's arms, Naruto's father asking where he went wrong. Naruto is evil, with Naruto explaining no one in the Akatsuki is evil, they're just broken. They're people that have suffered the worst from each and every war, and here they stand, wanting to make this world a better place. This would leave a tear in his father's eyes as he gets a hug. Behind him, Hashirama, who had barely survived the initial confrontation from Madara, would actually say a word to Kakuzu, someone he had knew but never fought. He said that he thought Kakuzu was the worst of the worst, stealing hearts and so on and so forth. With Kakuzu nodding, he said, "Yes, I've done many horrible things throughout my lifespan to extend my own life, but this is the initial outcome I'd hoped for one day. Now, I could die happy." As we see the Akatsuki celebrate what had happened here. No Kaguya, since Zetsu was barely saved by Obito and now trapped in his dimension, and everyone else dead. Naruto would slowly go to each individual, siphoning off their chakra. Except the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki are now a global foundation that would protect this world against any threat. Sasuke had actually joined their ranks when he heard about this. There's no evil. There's only living a comfortable life. Humans all over the world would slowly lose the ability to generate chakra, as Naruto would spread his word. And eventually, after catching every criminal that refused, and freeing every civilian and shinobi, the Naruto world is at that exactly. Peace. And now that Naruto has returned, he actually returned to a pretty good sight. A pregnant Hinata. So, I really do hope y'all had enjoyed What If Naruto and Hinata Were Evil. I know this was a very cramped part with very little going over each situation, but there was no Kaguya yet. And if you do want to see a Naruto The Last rendition of this, which might include Kaguya and maybe even a Boruto rendition of this, then you guys just need to stick around and continue supporting me. Obviously, I cannot promise that this would come out anytime soon since I have yet to watch Boruto, but it is coming up soon on my watch list. So, I would like to thank each and every individual that has stuck around to the end of this series, and I would also like to thank the channel members. And if you do want these videos a day to a week early, consider becoming a channel member since that's kind of their prev. So, without further ado, this has been your boy Six. Peace.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.